Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's nice to have live people to talk to while these things are being recorded. Hi, Michelle. Hi to the rest of you that I don't know, and welcome to this webinar. We are going to talk about today preparing for the Lost Tools of Writing Level 1. So we're going to be talking about prerequisites. Excuse me. And so first, I would like us just to think together for a few minutes. And I'm not going to write anything on the board yet, but just to think about an analogy that we can use. And so the analogy is a tree, and we're going to think about learning, studying, deciding. So let's think about first what are, and I'm not going to write this on the board yet, but just let's think about what are the leaves on the tree. So if we look at the leaves as almost the fruit of what we might study, then what are all the things that could be leaves? What are all the things? And let's just think about this for a few minutes. And then when we get to the next couple steps, I'll start writing notes on the board. But first, let's just think. And you might write on a piece of paper if you want to, but what are some of the things that the leaves might be in this analogy? The things we could learn, the things we could study, the things we could think about. The leaves. And we're almost getting to the fruit, but not quite. So, all right, we're going to switch pictures here. I am not the most technologically equipped person. Try to manage this
So,
as well as we can. Go ahead, Michelle.
so I'm thinking about the leaves as the thing that allows the tree to take in nutrient from the sun. So I'm kind of trying to
Thank you for that, because I'm not
think about,
thinking
is
quite
that
well. I wasn't, now that you mention it, that's what leaves do, right? Photosynthesis thing. I hadn't gotten to photosynthesis yet. I'm thinking of a stick figure. That this is a leaf. These are the leaves. They go into branches, and then there's a big stick in the middle, and that's the trunk.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks for asking the question. That's clarifying. That's very helpful. And I need all the help I can get, because some people talk about mimetic teaching and that the mode of teaching, and some people talk about Socratic teaching in that form. Well, I have a third form of teaching, and that's to cause confusion. And then you ask a lot of questions, and then you learn because you're asking your own questions, because I'm throwing out things that don't make sense. And so please ask. So yeah, let's go back to my tree is just a stick, a big thick stick with some more sticks, and then the leaves on the ends. And so I guess what I'm thinking is that, well, maybe we have literature out there, or linear algebra, or yeah, maybe British literature, linear algebra, underwater basket weaving. I don't know. Any of those things could be out there on the ends. So the next so what we want to think about next then is what are the branches? Like what are the things that support that? So I'm kind of working our way backwards, like what might be the goals of our learning, and then how are we going to get there? So maybe I should have said, if you see a leaf, how are we going to get to it? So then what would be the branches? And actually, this part I haven't thought about very much, the branches that would be connected to the leaves. Because what I really want to get to is that we're talking about prerequisites, then we want to get to what is the trunk of the tree? What is it that makes possible all of the things it supports? Like what, before we can get to linear algebra, before we can get to British literature, before we can get to things like that, what is it that we need to build in our students in order for them to be able to get there, or in ourselves? So if I wanted to if I wanted to study British literature, maybe if that's my leaf, then I need a branch that's about literature in general, possibly. Um, I didn't write any examples, so I'm thinking of this as we go. But or if I want to study linear algebra, then the branches might be just algebra. And then the trunk for that would be addition and subtraction and multiplication, probably long division. But then, we're getting lower and lower to the bottom of the trunk, then we have just skills of arithmetic. So that's what I'm thinking of. If there are all the things in the world to study or think about, how does that poem go? And the world has so many wonderful things, we should all be happy as kings. So if those are all the things out there that we could study, then what are the branches that support that? And then what is the trunk of the tree of learning? So that's the question, is what is the trunk of the tree of learning? What do we need in order to reach the branch so that we can get out to the leaves that are, I mean, the things that I said are more specialized, British literature or linear algebra or botany, maybe, or the symphonies of Bach or things like that. What are we going to have to do if all of those things are leaves, and we have everything from a symphony to or everything from Bach's symphonies to linear algebra and British literature or South African literature, then what does it take to get there? And so we see that if we want to get to the linear algebra branch, we're going to have some more numerical arts in the branches and the trunk that we need to get to. If we want to get to South African literature, then it's going to be a literature branch. And if we want to get to the Bach symphonies, we need to get to or Beethoven symphonies. We need to get to, I was thinking of Beethoven, I said Bach. We need to get to the branch of symphonies, or difference between symphonies and sonatas, or musical forms, or things like that. So what is the prerequisite for all of those things? If we want to study musical forms, and we want to study literature, and we want to study linear algebra, what's the trunk? What are the first things that we need to have that support all of those other things? And I would like to propose that the trunk of all of those kinds of learning are the skills that are included in level 1 of the Lost Tools of Writing. So we call it Lost Tools of Writing, but really it has other nicknames. Sometimes we call it the Lost Tools of Thinking. Michelle, you're smiling. What else do we call it?
That was just the one I was thinking of, the Lost Tools of Thinking. Yeah.
Well, sometimes we call it the Lost Tools of Reading, because if you're asking questions and you're reading a book and you're asking these questions, it's helping you to read better. So sometimes we call it the Lost Tools of Reading. So all of these verbal skills are included in the Lost Tools of Writing. And actually, before we go any further, I would like to stop for a second and let you ask you to introduce yourselves briefly, because I recognize two faces. Tana, you were here for a second. Michelle, I see you. And the other two of you I don't know. So could you just tell me really quickly, what's your experience with Lost Tools, Michelle? I could answer for you, but I'll let you talk. I'll let you speak for yourself. I don't know all of it.
So I'm a graduate of the CiRCE apprenticeship and have taught Lost Tools of Writing for 5 or 6 years now. So that's my experience.
You must like it.
Yes, I do. I love it.
What do you just, I'm sorry, I can't help running down this rabbit trail a little bit. What do you love about it? It just, that's an interesting question to me always. But what is it about Lost Tools that you like so much?
What do I love about it? I love that it is how practical it is. to just everyday life.
Yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
somebody told me once, your house is so organized. And I thought, lost tools,
Yep.
and a lot of sorting, and the more you define, the more you compare, then the more you know this goes with this and that goes with that. And this doesn't, this thing is not
Yes.
like the others.
Hmm.
Yeah. So everyday life. Yeah, it really is. And that's exactly my point here, that it's the foundation for everything. It's for organizing closets, for yeah, for yeah, if that's a leaf on the tree, then Lost Tools is the trunk. What about Lisa? How are you? I do know you.
Hello. Yes. Okay, what question am I answering? Okay, my experience with Lost Tools.
Yes.
I have taught Lost Tools in in-person classes a couple times around to high schoolers, and now I am mainly teaching Lost Tools to middle schoolers online.
That's a
So
whole different world, isn't it?
it really is. It really is.
Yeah, I taught it in person first to high schoolers, and then I thought online. Yeah, then I had middle schoolers next, and with mixed with high schoolers, and I thought this is too young. You've got so much to do, just to go to the class. You can't just walk through the door and be there. So it's harder. Yeah. What is it you like so much about Lost Tools, Lisa? I'm gonna
I,
start.
I yeah, I appreciate the how it breaks writing down into very manageable logical steps and it makes it not so ambiguous and open-ended. So it really kind of demystifies how to tackle a writing assignment. I also love how the tools, even though Lost Tools focuses on the persuasive essay, I really appreciate how those tools can be applied to any kind of writing assignment or really anything like you said, anything in life for sure. I was talking with my husband. My husband is pursuing um, his dream is to produce a documentary. And so he has all this information. And so I was like, you've got to do an Annie chart, you have to start with invention and then you've got to move to arrangement and organize your ideas.
Yes. Got to sort those out. That's really cool. Yeah, so it applies to the kind of writing he's doing for it'll help him with how to write a documentary or organize it or yeah.
I
That's
hope. I hope so.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Okay, thanks, Lisa. Tana, do you want to pitch in? Oops, I can't hear you. I saw you said sure, but sound didn't work.
Yeah, okay. I have
Okay.
to hit both buttons. Okay, I have finished the apprenticeship and I teach, I taught online, but I've taught it in person to high school students. So, and even when I taught online, I chose hard books so that I would get high school students because I think the older the better. I
Right.
mean, the younger kids can do it, but they just, they struggle and the older kids just snap onto it right away. That said, when I work with younger kids, like middle school, grades 7 through 9, I find myself teaching them principles of LTW as I'm teaching, IEW or whatever else. I mean, so the concepts, go everywhere. But yeah, so I'm currently teaching levels 1, 2, and 3. So
Good. Yeah, it's universal, like you just said. Yeah, the skills go everywhere. Um, would you say that's what you like most about it, or is there something else you would add to that?
I mean, it's just, yeah, the thinking skills. It teaches you how to think and just, yeah, it's very universal.
Yeah.
And it's geared for all types of students, not just students that are very academic, but even the kid digging ditches for the construction crew needs to be able to articulate why he thinks it should be done this way.
Right. Or just to decide whether this is the kind of weather we have and
Yeah.
ask whether I should go to work today, or
Yeah.
this is how I feel. I wonder whether I should should I take the day off? Or yeah, it's just everybody has to think about these things, or whether he should apologize to his wife.
Mhm.
Anything, all those things. That's good. Yeah, it made me think of something else too that I forgot. So on we go. Okay, and Shayna, is that right? Did I say your name right?
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know if I should be in this webinar. I am a homeschool parent and I have no experience with Lost Tools of Writing. And is this for people who are teaching?
It's for people who have 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and you want to think about what to do with them at home.
Oh, I have a fifth grader and a seventh grader right now. And I was considering teaching Lost Tools of Writing to my eighth grader in the fall.
Yeah, you should be here. So you just heard a little bit about why you should stay and listen because of all the wonderful things Lost Tools does, and because it is the trunk of everything we're going to learn and
Mhm.
everything we need to think about. So,
Okay.
so yeah, and I'm sorry I got a little yeah, we're just talking about I got a little busy with introductions of
Oh,
all the people.
that's fine. And I guess I can give a little bit of our writing background is like I've gone in different directions and I'm wondering if Lost Tools of Writing is our next step or not. We started with writing and rhetoric for several years and then I really hated the 5 paragraph essay structure. And then I jumped onto that this year just to kind of give my kids that experience of that tool. And now I'm wondering if for my eighth grader, I should jump over to help her process of thinking through arguments
Mhm.
better. I noticed that that's a weak point.
Okay, I say yes. And you may have done a lot of this preparation already, maybe not with your younger ones, I don't know, but
Mhm.
we'll talk some more about that. And let me just say too, before we go on, that on Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern time, which is the same time as today. So if you're in California, it's noon. Whatever we just started today, the same time, there's a webinar on Thursday, and there's a free Q&A session for people to come in and just ask questions. So if this helps you see something about preparing and then makes you think more about Lost Tools, and then you have more questions, and that's a good place to come to. We also have a couple of forums where you can just ask questions anytime.
Oh, thank you. I'm also curious about, I heard that sometimes it can feel like a step backwards before you move forwards. I'd also love to see writing samples of kids, but is that something I could get?
Yes, if you'll email me later, I can send you any of that stuff. Let me just put this here. It's Camille at
Okay.
cerseiinstitute.org.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Here, I'll put that up here. And oh, you said something I wanted to respond to. Now I forgot what I was thinking. Oh, it feels like you're going backwards. Yeah, the analogy that we use for that is that well, IEW, well, whatever you use, the students might be writing some stuff, but then when you get to Lost Tools, it's not the first essay is not a 5-paragraph essay, it's a 5-sentence essay. But that core is going to be in your doctoral thesis. And so you need to get it right and get it internalized and so that we start there and then add to it. It's like, so the analogy we use is that when you see construction, speaking of, we were talking about construction, when you see somebody scrape the ground and bring in building materials, they're going to build like a 1-story house or strip center or something. And then when you see construction start and they dig a giant hole that goes down 2 or 3 stories into the ground, it looks like they're going backwards. But that means they're going to build something that's 10 stories or more. Well, I don't know exactly, but it means they're building a high rise. And so it needs a deeper foundation. So that's what Lost Tools provides. And it is the trunk of the tree of learning. It provides the foundational verbal skills for linear algebra, for South African literature, for Beethoven symphonies, whatever we're going to read or study later on. And that's one of the great things about classical education is that it's all about giving our students skills and cultivating their humanity so that they can decide what kind of job training they want when they're older, and then they can make wise decisions and not just train them from the beginning just to do some job. But the skills that are in Lost Tools, the Lost Tools of thinking, Lost Tools of reading, Lost Tools of writing, all these thinking skills that are in this program are foundational for everything. So Lost Tools is the trunk of the tree of learning. And if your students are going to keep learning, Lost Tools is a good place to start. It's a good thing to have for a foundation. So I'd highly recommend it for 8th grade. And I know what I started to say earlier. I was in a meeting last week about Lost Tools, and we were talking about one particular lesson. And I was talking with Andrew Kern and somebody else. And I said, well, you know, it depends on who our audience is, just like everything we write. So I said, you know, do we, you know, if we're teaching this to 12-year-olds, Tana, I think you made me think about this. If we're teaching this to 12-year-olds, then we need to make sure we expose the internal logic of the lesson really well. We need to give lots of examples. We need to go slowly. And then, but if you start with a 15-year-old, you won't have to be that careful or move that slowly, because the older we are, the more quickly we learn these skills. I mean, I was 40, you know, and I'd never been taught this way. And so it's, I won't say it was fast, but it was faster than a 12-year-old, I hope. So, but it's appropriate for every age, because these are the foundational thinking skills for everything we'll study, think, do, decide from then on. So when we think of verbal skills, so yeah, we're going to talk today about more of what happens before level 1, or what students, how to be prepared for level 1. And so that's why I was saying, you know, if you have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, this is going to help you today. But even with older students, you might want to do some of these things. But I'd like to say too, just from the beginning, if you have, like, I remember having an 8th grader that I wanted to start in Lost Tools of Writing level 1, and we had not carefully done all of these steps, but she did great anyway. She had written a lot of thank you notes, and she was holding her pencil correctly, a pen by that age. So she did fine. So if you haven't done all of these things, it doesn't mean that your child's not ready. But if you want to intentionally prepare them from age 3 or 4, then this is the kind of things. I mean, we had done a lot of this, I guess, and you may be already doing a lot of it. There may be one, or I think there's a couple of key things here that we talked about a week or two ago that I think will be helpful. But most of this will probably be familiar to you, to all of you. So if we think, let's first think about reading, the verbal skills of reading, and what a student needs to do to be able to read well enough to be prepared for Lost Tools. So first thing is listening. And there are books written just about listening. But the first thing we do is read aloud to our children. And that's one of the most important things that we can do. And it increases their comprehension. It increases their vocabulary. I mean, it does all kinds of, it increases their moral imagination. I mean, I can list all these technical things, but also it's just a thing of beauty, and it's a relationship if our relationship with our children includes this, it enriches everything we do. So reading aloud to our children is important, and they are reading along with us in their minds. The next thing you want to see is, well, can they sit and listen? You know, you can tell in a room full of 6-year-olds. Which ones have been read to and which ones have not, because they have a longer attention span, if they have been. So the next thing we want to see is if they can follow a story. So, you know, my 8th grader could do this, even though I didn't put it on a list and do it on purpose with her every day. But can they follow a story? Like, you'll find 3-year-olds probably and older who will listen to the story and follow along and be with you, and they understand what's happening. They understand this is the person in the story and what he's doing. And then you can see if they're really thinking, mentally engaged, because they'll light up when something happens, when something good happens to a character, or when they understand something or they see something, they have an insight. You can see that they light up. And if they can tell the story back to you, then that also shows you that they're understanding what happened, that they can find a character and follow the actions, or follow this character through the story. So if they if they can listen to you, if they can follow the story, if they light up when something happens, or they say, oh, no, don't do it, then you know that they understand the story. And this is how we're assessing them. If they can do these things, then they're ready to move on. So we're always in the classroom, at home, we're always informally assessing our children every time they speak or tell us back a story. We're thinking about how well they did it, or whether they can do it, or what is it that they missed, or what they might need, or what they understand. So we're assessing them as they go. And then if we talk to them about the story, if we ask them, should this person have done this thing? And then they can start to think about it. And this may not be age 3, but maybe it would be, but certainly 4, 5, 6. And you can talk to them about it and say, well, maybe he could have done this, or maybe he should have done that. And they can understand the story better and talk with you about it like that. Then that's another thing that you can assess that readiness in. And then when they can do all of these things, they are reading. They're doing dependent reading. You are looking at the page and decoding it for them and saying the words, making the sounds and saying the words, and giving inflection that helps give meaning to the sentences and to the actions, to the characters. But so they're dependent on you for that. But they are, in a sense, in their minds, they are reading. They are taking in the story, they're understanding it, they're thinking about it. So this is dependent reading. And that's one step in getting them to be reading independently. So our goal is to move them from dependent reading to independent reading. And when the dependent reading is internalized, when they are talking to you about the story and they can tell it back to you, then they're reading dependently. And you are cultivating literary skills in reading when they're doing that. You're cultivating their literary skills. And so this is just a brief overview. I looked up something today and found a website called Empowered Parents. And this is a young gal. I think she's a mom. She has a bachelor's in something of early childhood from University of South Africa, which is why that was on my mind earlier. But it's called Empowered Parent. And she lists about 50 things you can do with your preschoolers to cultivate some of these things. So if you want, I can't say I can't guarantee it. I haven't even read the whole page that she posted, but it had a lot of interesting things there. And it says sing the alphabet song and make letters out of dough and cookie dough and things like that. So it's probably a lot of it you're reading. You're doing already, but if you just want some more things to put on a checklist, she's got a bunch. And from what I saw, it looked good. That's just from my cursory glance at it today. She has no affiliation with Circe. I just thought, we're already doing these things, and a couple others, she had some good ideas. And there are 50. So that's a lot. So at this stage, even these really little people are reading dependently. They're helping you, and you're helping them, and you're cultivating literacy skills in them. But now they need mechanical skills to read physically. That's what their minds are doing. Now they need physically. And I'm sure this happens in your houses, but there are some places where you give a child a book, he won't even know how to open it, or he won't open it. Doesn't even know it does open. So if your child will sit down, open a book, look at the pictures, turn the pages. I think we probably have seen that, but that's in all of our children at home. But those are some of the first mechanical skills of physically reading. And that's what we mean by mechanical skills. What physically does it take to read a book, to acquire these other verbal skills? And at some point when they're acquiring those physical skills, open the book, look at the pictures, turn the pages, they are also learning at the same time. They're at some point, they're learning decoding. They're learning A makes the sound of ah, and T makes the sound of t, C makes the sound of k. And if you put k and ah and t together, then it says cat. So that's what we mean by decoding. So some children are decoding. They're decoding at a different level from the level that they're reading, because what's happening in their minds, the literacy level is not the same as their mechanical level or decoding level. Their mechanical skills are not there yet, even though they're acquiring these literacy skills. But then we want to take them from decoding to fluency in reading, and that's when they're reading independently without us. But when we continue to read aloud to them and we express the story and the sentences and those things, then they're still acquiring fluency along the way. And reading is a mental activity. I think I said that. And the dependent reading that they're doing is they're reading at a very high level, but the fluency is helped by our continuing to read aloud to them. So what I was trying to remember to say is that we want to do this over and over and over, year after year. This is not just, I'll do this from fall to spring and then we'll be finished. But the fluency is cultivated for a long time in the literacy and mechanical skills. But you want some of these things to be internalized before you move to the next, so that they don't have to think about which way to turn the book to open it. They don't have to know, turn the pages right to left. We read from left to right. And that helps them when they learn decoding. And then they're continuing to gain fluency for a long time. Because reading means decoding, but reading also means, can you read a sentence and see what it means? Or can you read what happens to a character and understand the forces behind it or the emotions behind it and things like that? So that's eventually the reading that we're aiming for. But right now we're talking about how to get them to the 12-year-old level. So we're not going to talk too much about that right this minute, but that's our goal. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about writing now. I don't know. Well, does anybody want to talk about reading anymore or have any questions or about this input? These are verbal skills input that we're putting into the children before they start to read for themselves. I guess that's some output when they sound out the letters and say the sentences that they see on the page. Okay. And then, so the other part of the verbal skills, we have the input from reading, and then we're asking eventually for output in writing, that we want them to have their ideas and to give them to us in writing. So we keep reading. That's the input they're getting. We want them to be thinking. Writing, again, if you're familiar with Lost Tools, you'll know it's not something that just, it's not about the paper, because writing happens in our minds also. And if writing, people talk about writing and we say that writing is hard because we can't think of what to say. But if we can think of something, we can write it down because we know how to hold a pencil. So it's easy to write a grocery list. That's not hard writing. But if I wanted to write a story or a curriculum resource, or a persuasive address, then that takes a lot of thinking. And so the skills that we need to learn, the skills of writing that we need to learn, are lots and lots of them are thinking skills. And that's why in Lost Tools, you'll find material logic in the canon of invention. You'll find formal logic when you're in the canon of arrangement. There's more to it than that, but those are in there. I mean, they're in more places than that, but there's more to arrangement than formal logic. But formal logic is in the arrangement lessons, some of them more than others. So, all right. So in writing, again, they have reading input, they're thinking, and they're speaking. And they tell us their ideas. And even if you're and their minds are full, they're overflowing. We can tell this with 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. They have so much to say, and they're thinking, and they're thinking like children, but they think a lot, and they have imaginations, and there's more going on in the mind than they can put on a piece of paper. So here's the bridge. This is what we can do to help get our students from that kind of thinking to writing. And often I've heard parents say, or teachers say, that I know he doesn't know he has ideas, but he can't get them onto the paper. Can't go from mind to paper. So here's how we help them do that. We're the bridge. So they speak, they tell us their ideas, and then we write them. So a 3-year-old, I'm thinking I need to do this with my grandson. When he colors a picture, I need to say, tell me what the picture is. And if he says it's a dinosaur with a leaf in its mouth, then I write at the bottom of the page, it's a dinosaur with a leaf in its mouth. And then he looks at it. And then he sees his words on paper. And then we talked about doing this in a kindergarten class. You can ask whether Curious George should have taken the yellow hat from the man. And if you're asking whether he should have taken the hat, they'll give you lots and lots of words and ideas. And if you write them on the board, then they can see their words written. They can see their ideas embodied when you write them, when the adult writes them. And then we do this over and over and over. They dictate, we write, and they see it. They dictate, we write, they see it. We can even do this when students are older. Sometimes, in fact, a parent emailed me last week and said, I have a 12-year-old and she's dyslexic, I think. And we've hit essay 5 in level 1. And this is it. As far as we go. She said, we're going to keep doing it, but I need to know how. And so, I mean, this is what I did with I had a 9-year-old once like this that got jumped, and he told me what he thought and I wrote it down and we turned it in. So I told the mom, she can tell you her ideas, you write them down and turn it in. So it's all her ideas. It's just not her mechanics. So we can be the bridge for them in that way so that mechanically their writing gets done, but they're doing the thinking. And I think Andrew put it this way. He said, the compassionate teacher has to understand that the mind is so much more full than the page, the paper, the piece of paper, the page. So this is how we're cultivating literacy skills in writing. And we do this over and over again, probably for a couple of years with students, maybe kindergarten, first grade would probably be the times we would do it the most, but we can do it, like I said, with a 3-year-old, we can do it still with a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old if they need it. But they need that bridge. They need to speak and then see it written. And then for them to have the mechanical skills for physical writing, the first thing they need to do, and some of this is happening again simultaneously with while you're reading to them and they're talking to you and you're discussing stories. Excuse me. During those same years, they're learning to hold a pencil correctly. I think most children don't anymore. But I'm old, but they need to hold a pencil correctly. It's good for them. It's good for their handwriting. They need to orient a piece of paper correctly. If you're in a class with high schoolers, you've probably seen one put the piece of paper on the table upside down and start to write on it. Or start with the page backwards every time so there's no left margin. So this is another thing that students are always taught how to do. And then they need to form letters correctly. And we usually start there, I think. And we don't always look at those habits that are even before that, to hold a pencil correctly, to orient the paper, and then to form the letters correctly. And then I'll just say that cursive, might give them courage. It does a lot of things. It helps their thinking because it's a little bit slower. It gives them time to think. It's artistic. It's a thing of beauty that they can create. It helps to overcome some dyslexic tendencies because of the way a B is formed and a D, very different from what we see typed. And handwriting is it's a different mental activity from typing. So handwriting does have a lot of benefits. Because I know some people would say, oh, just skip this. They don't need to write physically because we have computers now. But I would urge you to cultivate these skills too, these physical writing skills. And when these are internalized, then we can move on. And so that bridge where they dictate, we write, and they read it, now they can dictate to us, we write what they say, and then they can copy the writing. When they're no longer thinking of how to hold a pencil, they've internalized all those other things. They know how to form the letters, they're thinking, and now they can see their sentences and they can handwrite them mechanically without a problem, without speed bumps along the way. So that's the second stage, second part of that bridge. They dictate, we write, and then they write. So they're still doing copy work though. And then we want to do that for a couple years too. And then the next step is dictation, where we say the sentences and they write them. And it could be from a classroom conversation with their peers about a story, and they're writing what their peers say and clarifying their ideas that way. Or you could read from a book and then they write the sentences, and that's helping them to learn. And then you can check for their punctuation, spelling, and that kind of thing, if they can hear something and write it. And then the next thing that helps them prepare for a level 1 of Lost Tools is if they've used some kind of chart or table, some kind of form for their thinking. Sometimes like the one that springs to mind is the circumstance chart that's in the level 1 of Lost Tools. And when we're thinking about, if we're asking whether Curious George should have taken the yellow hat, then we're asking what else is going on around this person. And there's one chart where we draw circles and say, and a little farther away, there's this person, he's doing this thing. And then even farther away, there's that person, he's doing that thing. And or we can use boxes to write it in. I like the boxes. So these forms that hold our thoughts are sometimes unfamiliar to students, and they don't know what to do with them mechanically. And that can be an impediment to their thinking or using level 1 the way it's written right now. I mean, because it could be adapted for, the thinking parts for 6-year-olds, and then maybe you wouldn't put the boxes in there. But just to take level 1 as it is, they would need to see, just what happened with what to do with a table or a chart. And then it's somewhere along the way, they're going to get formal grammar, sentence parts, and how to match them. If you say the dog, then the verb says barks or runs. If you say dogs, the verb is bark or dogs bark. The dog barks, the dogs bark. So that's part of formal grammar, the harmonizing the subject and the predicate with each other. And that is best taught in translation. And so I'll say what I say over and over again. Every child needs 2 languages. I just heard a story. It's 3:43. I just heard a story about the family. Are you familiar with the Berlitz language program? It was probably the first one before Duolingo or anything like that. You learn Berlitz if you have to take a business trip in the 70s. And I just recently heard a story that the Berlitz family had a mother and a father who spoke different languages. And so each spoke his own native language to the child. And the son was the one telling the story. He said, so my mother spoke one language to me, my father spoke the other language to me, and then they hired a babysitter or something who spoke another language to me, a third language. And when I was little, I thought every human had his own language. So, and in a sense we do. But in any other language you can have besides English, whatever's handy for you. If you have grandparents, if you live close to the border, if you have Latin classes, 2 languages are the best way to learn grammar. So I'll just throw that in there. Translation. So when they're using all of those things, then they're ready for level 1. And this is here, again, but I said at the beginning, if you haven't spent the last 4 years aware with coaching these layers of skills with awareness, then just you can jump into level 1 anyway. And like Tana said, with the older students, they just get it. And because it is real life. The invention part of level 1 is material logic, and that is seeing if coming up with true statements. And we do that with the common topics. We define terms, we compare things, we look at circumstances, and children are born doing these things. Aristotle, I know I've heard some Christians object to the Aristotle being used here, but he looked around at the way God made people and he wrote down what he saw. And we think like this anyway. Every time you give a child something to eat and he says, what is it? He's using the topic of definition. And when the child says his cookie is bigger than mine, he's using the topic of comparison. And when he tells his brother, Mommy said, he is using a topic of testimony. So these are not things that we have to teach them. This is how children, humans think by nature. And we are taking these human skills, human faculties and abilities, and we are cultivating them so that we can think better, think on purpose, and so we can do it better. And if you want to hear more about that, there's another webinar. I think it was a free webinar. It's listed somewhere in the CiRCE webinars. It's called Thinking Skills for Young Children. And it talks about a lot more about how to, in the when they're still doing dependent reading, what are ways that you can have those conversations with them, that you can cultivate their awareness of comparison, that you can help them to do it more so they can do it better. You can do it on purpose. They can do it on purpose. And you can ask, how are these two things the same? What is it that they both are? What is it that they both have? What do they both do? And you can do that with kindergarten. So, but there's a lot more detail about those common topics and how to use them in a kindergarten class or at home in the car with your own children. So I'll stop here and see and ask questions. We do have the session Thursday, the free Q&A session. If you're new to Lost Tools and you want to ask more about what's coming in that program, this is about what happens before it. So we have that Thursday at the same time as today's. But so what are your thoughts? You haven't stopped me on the way along the way. So Michelle, what are you thinking? What strikes you about this, or what questions do you have? Or you can pass. I'm going from the bottom up on my screen.
I think it's a helpful reminder that really the preparation is just, I don't know, I look at this list and I just think that's just all the things that we naturally did
Yes.
as part of our as part of educating our kids. Mine are both grown and graduated now. So
Yeah.
I just,
Mine have
it makes it, I don't know. And just, I kind of look at that list and I'm like, okay, that's just, it seems natural, like what you just do with your children.
Right. It does. And
Yeah.
and the population here, especially in this webinar today, we're the group who does these things. There are a lot of people. My parents didn't do all these things with me, but I think I got a lot of some of it at home and some of it at school. And so,
Yeah.
I think this is just naturally what we do. I don't have to read that lady's list about empowered parents to know I should sing the ABC song with my kids.
Yeah.
But there may be some things on there I hadn't thought of, but
I think what was helpful is that the being the bridge, the helping them to see their words on paper.
I think that
that was a very helpful reminder.
I figured that would be the one thing that maybe we hadn't talked about. So this is probably the key to what we've done today. I'm going to put that in red. We call it the writing cycle. That that they can start to see that this is what words look like. That I said it, and this is how it's embodied. It's how our ideas are incarnated. And then as they get older, they'll do it themselves. Then they're right now in all these lists, I've probably only taken us up maybe to about age 10 and maybe not as much for the 11-year-olds, or somewhere kind of crossing over, getting ready for level 1, or maybe would be there anyway if they hadn't done these things. But to hear a story and hear to hear ideas about a story, and then write the ideas. But that can be part of they speak, we write it, and they observe. But then so they might be writing sentences that we've read, or they might be writing or copying sentences that or when we get to the mechanical part especially, they're copying sentences that they've said, or a story that they've written they may tell a story and we write it all down and they write the whole story. Or they talk about something in class and then they or with other children, their siblings or their parent, and then understand it better and then write that. So the kind of writing that follows a conversation, not just from the reading of the book. But okay, Lisa, what about you?
I'm thinking about the statement you made a couple minutes ago. Well, if they've done these things, then they're ready for lost tools. And I'm like, but then you just said, I've really only taken us to about age 10.
I'm sorry.
In my mind, I'm like, I'm still processing that. I'm like,
I
well, they
probably-
might be ready for lost tools types of activities, but they're certainly not ready to go through lost tools level 1 as written, really.
Yeah, and so, well, if they're, the only thing that I left out the reason I said that was I had left out talking about a story and writing what they had, writing the conversation in class. So I went back and filled in that spot. But if they can read and write fluently and use charts, then they're probably able to use lost tools as it is written. But if you do have some 12-year-olds, I mean, then you could have some adaptations for them. And that's kind of what I mentioned that we were talking about last week, that you would do with them. If your audience is 12-year-olds or if your audience is 15-year-olds. And I think the adaptations would be unique to each canon, because in invention, they're going to be thinking a lot and they can do all kinds of thinking. But then again, you might have to help them write it down. And I think that would be that bridge thing to help them see their own thoughts on paper. Or maybe you're just like that 12-year-old's mom that I talked to last week. Maybe you just need to write everything that they need to on paper, so that's another adaptation that could be done. Or if they haven't had charts, then they need to see and see you fill in the chart, which is what a lost tools teacher would do. I think if they say, we're going to use this page to talk about circumstance, we're going to, what's going on somewhere else at the same time. So here are the boxes, or here are the circles, and I'm going to show you one example, and then you fill it in for them, and then you give her another example and fill it in for them. And then they see how to fill it in for themselves. Probably most of them, even if they've never seen a chart before, by the time they're 12 or 13, could watch you fill in a chart, and then they could put the same
Oh,
words.
right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I think I'm thinking of it from the perspective of someone who's teaching a variety of people, and they're in different places. And another challenge that I have, and often, trying to assess someone that you don't know. It's one thing to know, this is your child you've worked with because you've homeschooled them, or you've been in co-op with them or whatever for a couple of years. That's one thing. But to have, someone come in and you don't know them at all, and you're trying to assess based on a writing sample, you don't know what, all of these things that you just listed on this piece of paper, you really don't know what they have and what they don't.
That's right. And there's an article about that I would like to find about assessment. And Buck Holler wrote this a long time ago, and it's on the CiRCE Institute blog, and it's called Marking Readiness. I highly recommend this to you. It was posted in 2010.
Wow.
And it's so good. And it's not long. I mean, that's the whole thing right there. But he talks about that. Buck Holler was a cowboy at one point, believe it or not. He writes in here about he has to start the cult. His job for a few years was starting a cult. He said, before I became an educator, I used to start cults for a world champion reining trainer, cow horse trainer. His job was to take an unbroken colt, get him ready for the next phase. And he said at some point the boss would ask, is she ready? Is filly ready? He never asked me if she passed a test. There was no test. But there were various indicators that marked her readiness. She had to do turn, stop, back up, know her leads, change leads, relax her head, lower her head, position her shoulders. There's another long list. So I can send you, let me get, okay. The link for this. So this is exactly what you're talking about, Lisa, that this is what you have to do to assess a child. You have to know them. You can't give them one test or look at one writing sample and say, now I know. You have to see what they do every day. And some days they do better than others, even when they are ready. And some days they do better than others when they're not ready. So I wanted to put that out there for marking the readiness. But you're absolutely right. So then did you have I think I interrupted you because I got so excited about what you were
No,
saying.
I don't think so. No, and that wasn't meant as a challenge at all. It was just, I was like, okay, I'm processing.
Right.
Trying-
Because this is what we have to do, but it's exactly what he talks about. What do we do when he says, this is the only way I can assess them.
Well, and I think what you said about adapting is spot on. That really, and I love that about the program too, that it really is something that can be adapted. You can stay on an essay and, like repeat the same essay cycle, but using a different story or using a different issue or whatever. And, that's super helpful. So,
Yeah. And I know for a while he was helping to homeschool his children and they were pretty young and for writing, I think they go to essay 2 or essay 3. Maybe they didn't even, maybe essay 2. And his girls were little and he had them write essay 2 the whole year. But boy, they internalized that structure.
mhm.
And so
Yeah.
stop there. And really the age of readiness to begin invention is from birth, like I talked about with the common topics that they use already. And the age of readiness for arrangement is usually around middle school, just by nature, just without training, without adaptation, without modifications. And then for elocution is usually more high school, because that's when we're talking about style and voice and things like that. So the readiness is yeah, it can happen different places for different canons. And so they probably need more help in elocution if they're young. But we all need help with thinking. I mean, that's just, to learn to be aware of the names of the topics and things like that. We're not born knowing those. And the more we can name things, the more they can come when we call them. We can use them more easily. Tana, what about you? You probably know all this stuff too. Anything strike you today?
Well, I have a student that is a high school student that is 15 who is struggling, and you know, part of me is I don't know. I would say, oh well, because I'm teaching the Iliad, and I'm like, well, it's the book. He doesn't understand the book. But even when I had him I let them pick their own topic in the last essay before Christmas, and his answers were just so simplistic.
I mean, his issue, he was
No, I mean he picked whether he should, do some stunt, how boys are.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought, well, maybe it's familiarity with with the story, and that the story is over his head, but then, how do you, is the simplistic thinking, is that just that they're not ready for LTW, or is that, I don't know. I would expect, his work reminded me what I would expect of a 7th grader.
Yeah, it could be a lot of things. Maybe he hasn't done enough of this. Maybe he doesn't really have the skills yet to present what he does understand. It's possible. I mean, that's one possibility. That, I mean, it could be mechanical writing skills, or it could be just he hasn't had enough practice in thinking to be able to or reading to be able to see what you're seeing in the book. So he might read the sentence and not really understand what it means, or read a a chapter or a book of it and not really get what they're doing,
Right.
what's happening in the story. So it could be a reading issue. But in that case, I don't know if you teach them the 5-color highlighting system, Did you learn that in the
Yeah.
apprenticeship? I don't know whose group you were in,
Mhm.
but for a child who's struggling with reading, that can help sometimes if they just scan first and just put all the names in pink. So now they know who the people are. And then they scan again and they mark the green, then they went to battle and then they stopped fighting. Then he said it, then the other guy said it, then the other guy said it. So here's this one's speech and then there's that one's speech. And then the first person gave another speech, and that's that book of the Iliad. So that might help him to do at least the pinks and the greens to see the structure of the book and who's there. And then maybe the yellow just, to get the action.
Right.
And so it may just be, or, and also too, if he could read a children's book first, I don't know if you asked your high schoolers to do that before they tackle the Iliad, but just so he gets an idea of who the characters are and what's the problem in the story, and then what they do about it.
Yeah. I mean, second semester, I just started giving them the option of fairy tales. But
And
but
maybe,
even with the, real life situation, his thinking was so simplistic. And his mother's like, well, English isn't his thing. So he probably isn't widely read. If, who knows, there may be a reading disability in there somewhere that, because when I do the oral review in class, he knows all the things. He understands LTW, but it's like he has it's like he knows the ingredients, but he doesn't understand how they go together.
right. And there may be that disconnect between the full
Yeah.
mind and what can get to the page.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I seem to have a student every year who just doesn't get it and everyone else is getting it. I'm like, what's going on?
I
And
know,
just, made me want to watch this and see, okay, what makes them ready for this? So yeah.
well, it sounds like it could be a reading problem, that he's not understanding what he's reading. And so maybe an audiobook would help if he could follow along with the book while it's being read to him. Cause it sounds, if he had been read out loud to, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much
Yeah.
they read out loud to him. And if his mom would read the Iliad out loud with him, that'd be great.
Right.
Audiobook. I mean, because then she can stop and listen, and she can see when he gets confused or ask questions or things like that. But then an audiobook might be good too. But then highlighting while he's looking at it. So, just listen to the audiobook and put pink every time there's a name, if he can follow along. And if he really is having trouble reading, then even following the audiobook to put pink for names, that'd be a clue too.
Camille, this is making me think that one of the and what Tana is saying is that just that ability to attend to the details, to really be able to think through, okay, what were the details of the story? What are the details about the characters? And to really think about that, and even that the skill of going back and looking.
Right. And yeah, because they have to listen, they have to remember, and then they have to understand what those things are, those details. You have to notice them in the first place. They may have to be taught how to see those details. Like when you walk through a forest or the sky, you look at the night sky and somebody says, oh, look, there's that, or there's that, or, that's a bat, and I think I've never seen a bat. I've never seen a meteor. And somebody's had to say, well, look for this. This is how bats look. Well, this is what bats look like when they fly. And when Dr. Shorman told me that, I looked up and said, oh, there's a bat, but I had to be taught how to see it. And so sometimes I think that happens too. We need to teach our students how to perceive those things in literature. It's not easy. We have to perceive it. We have to be aware that we perceive it, and we have to communicate how to perceive it. And we have to do it in a way that reaches, that first we have to assess and understand who our audience is, who's that person that we're talking to. What do they understand? What do they not understand? So teaching is hard. That's why we're tired. And Shayna, I don't want to ignore you. Do you have any questions or comments at this point?
No, I think I'll email you and then I'll come back to a question and answer. I think I've been looking at this curriculum myself, but I need to kind of get my hands on it so I can look at it more in person.
Okay.
But looking, listening in, I feel like my kids are ready. Like I could even do this with my 5th grader.
Yeah.
So.
in conversations, and it's so much fun. It's delightful. I mean, this is about learning how to perceive the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, and we have a perception of something that's true that we didn't know before, it's an aha moment, and it's delightful, and humans love that. And we do want to know, we do want to learn. And oh, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen anymore.
And one thing we do a lot of in our household is reading. We read together, we read by ourselves, we listen to audiobooks together by ourselves. We always have like 5 books going on. So I
Well, you
feel like,
found the
okay,
people.
we could use our books and have these shared discussions together. So
Yes, yeah, it's a wonderful thing. Cool. That'd be great. I'd love to see you Thursday. That sounds good. And we're 6 minutes over, and I'm sorry I've kept you. I mean, if you have more questions, I'm happy to answer them, or you're welcome to come on Thursday. But I will dismiss us now. There's Aria. I didn't see that sign before. Is that somebody else, or is that maybe that's sometimes children's names are on these screens? Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and I will stop the recording and be dismissed, and maybe see you Thursday.